Good afternoon. My name is Jelena Pizzolato, and I wish you a very warm welcome to the third episode of Sustainable After, an interview series brought to you by Loomish, a Swiss investment management firm. In these weekly panel discussions, our goal is to explore the ways in which the COVID-19 crisis could actually serve as a catalyst for change in fashion. So each week we are hosting conversations with entrepreneurs, brands, investors, and opinion leaders that are working in and around fashion sustainability. Today, I'm very happy to present to you three remarkable individuals and founders on their own. So let me begin by introducing Michela Puddu. Michela is a CEO, a co-founder at Haelixa. She has a PhD in chemical engineering, and among her many accomplishments, she was also the winner of the EU Women Innovator Prize. It is really a pleasure to have you with us, Michela. Could you tell us a little bit more about yourself, what you do, and how it connects to fashion sustainability?
Sure. So I'm CEO and co-founder of Haelixa, which is offering solution to bring transparency into textile fashion supply chains. And the services we provide are based on a technology that I've co-developed during my PhD. And the idea is to provide garments with a traceable fingerprint from the raw material stage until the retail level. And the reason we do that is because when we talk about sustainability, we always need supply chain transparency first. And that in turn requires traceability of product and materials, right? So that's what we do. And by bringing increased transparency, we offer all the actors in the supply chain, including the end consumers, to prove product claim related to origin, quality, and sustainability.
Very, very interesting, Michaela. You're going to tell us more about that later on. I'll just go on presenting Marta. Marta Waydel, she's also a researcher. She's a fashion futurist, a seasoned speaker, and she has a very strong interest in sustainability and innovation. So welcome to this episode, Marta. And could you please tell us a little bit about what you do and how it connects with fashion sustainability?
Sure. So thank you for having me here, and hello everyone. I've been in fashion industry for over 20 years now, and I realized how the industry is changing, and I decided to do something about it. And I got really passionate about consumer behavior and trying to make it more sustainable. And I started following all the innovation within the industry. And I'm trying to connect it. So now I'm a researcher in the field and also a strategist. And also I'm working on a platform that is trying to connect everyone in the field, you know, to be some kind of open space for both startups and brands to try to research how consumer can do smarter decisions while buying fashion. Consuming fashion, not only buying.
Yeah, so I'm sure you will have a chance to tell us more about that later on, especially when it comes to the role of startups as well, as we work together also on Fashion Innovation Award. I'm happy now to present Felix. So Felix Winckler, he's the co-founder and CCO of Reflaunt. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing well the name of the company, Felix. So Felix has a very interesting background because he's a lawyer that turned into a serial entrepreneur, and he has founded companies both in the US and the UK. So it's a pleasure to have you with us, Felix. And could you tell us a little bit more about your current project and how it relates to sustainability?
Oh, thank you very much for having me today. So I'm Felix Winckler, the co-founder of Reflaunt. You pronounced it perfectly. And our service is allowing brands to offer to their customers the possibility to resell their past purchases. The technology is effectively allowing customers to be able to list their past purchases onto a global network of secondhand marketplace to be able to resell these items at some point. So we've got different ways to integrate ourselves. Maybe we have an opportunity to talk about it, but the basic integration is integrating a button, a bit like a PayPal button, next to the customer past purchases on the brands or a multi-brands e-commerce in the My Account section of the customer. So if you go onto this My Account section, generally you've got listed your past purchases. Our technology, it's this little button that allows you to list your product for resale. When the customer presses that button, we capture the data related to that product, and we push that list simultaneously on Vestiaire Collective, Rebel, Hardly Ever Worn It, about 15 to 20 platforms around the world that specialize in selling secondhand goods. And our end goal is basically to rationalize consumption patterns and facilitate the resale process, which could be a bit complicated sometimes for customers. And so we do this in the hope that by making the process of resale becomes easier, customer would shift from the mass consumption of fast fashion to a slower and more rationalized consumption of high quality products.
They're very interesting, Felix. I think that it's really wonderful how you actually gave visibility to brands, to the part of the product life that was previously invisible to them, in a way. So we're definitely going to go deeper into that later on.
Pleasure.
Speaking about sustainability, so let's say that's like the backdrop for all the sustainability initiatives, especially over the last few years, are the Sustainable Development Goals. So Michela, your business states that it strives to make a very critical contribution to some of the goals, such as related to the environment, human rights, green jobs, and equal working conditions. So could you tell us more about the importance of these, especially in the current crisis, and also about the ways that you at Haelixa address those issues?
Sure. So this crisis has revealed systemic failures across virtually all sectors, and therefore underline that we need to put even more effort in the achievement of the global goals. And now that we're slowly coming out of this crisis, we cannot simply go back to the status quo. And now, on the one hand, I believe that this crisis surely presents an opportunity to reset our daily habits and business practices also towards a greener society. So, for instance, the pandemic has shown, against all expectations, that it is possible to downsize the consumer economy. And it has also pushed companies to seek for different cost resilience trade-off, encouraged to localize production and sourcing. So the potential outcome of this is an overall reduction of the supply chain footprint, and therefore hopefully a sustainable recovery. And on the other hand, I think the biggest threat is that this crisis could also widen existing social inequalities. So what we have seen in the fashion industry is that most brands have been cancelling orders, and this in turn meant that no cash has been flowing down the supply chain to the farmers and workers who produce our clothes and are also the most vulnerable, right, of the supply chain. The lowest paid workforce. And so as a consequence, they are the ones that have been hit most badly. And so beyond the emergency and the emergency response, the immediate economic response, it is crucial now to address the social impact of the pandemic to ensure that no one in the supply chain is left behind. And so more than ever, government, civil society investors and retailers must come together to protect the people that are the origin of the supply chain. And solution like ours, by bringing increased visibility, can also help empowering these people at the origin of the supply chain.
Yeah, it is definitely a very important issue, and during the previous interviews, it's one of the things that really came out as the imperative, actually. So how do we protect the weakest link, which is actually the people at the beginning of the supply chain? Could you tell us a little bit more, Michela? So, as you say, like this crisis has shaken everything, and it has definitely affected the fashion industry in an unprecedented way. So could you tell us a little bit more about the situation from where you sit in the fashion industry? So how do you see it? How is it affecting your plans for this year?
Well, we have been, as everyone, affected because working in supply chain, we obviously have been impacted by the disruption of the supply chain, first of all, and by the fact that many goods haven't been, in the end, moving around. So this is the immediate effect. And the long-term effect, we will have to see how it will develop. For sure, the fashion industry will need some time to recover. But on the other hand, I think in situation like this one, a customer-centric approach is even more important. And what we have seen in the fashion industry is that consumers and movement have voiced clearly that it is not acceptable what many retailers have been doing, not paying for the order placed. And so as a consequence of this, I believe that consumers will look more closely to at which brands talk about sustainability and act accordingly. And so in this sense, an opportunity to rethink priorities, adapting business model, adapting supply chain, and that's where we can support them, rethinking supply chain and reshaping them in a more sustainable way.
Yeah. Felix, do you see the same kind of movements when it comes to luxury, as well, being that you are placed in a different part of the supply chain? What's your feeling about the situation at the moment?
Well, we are in a different position. We are professional sellers on the second-hand market, and that's one part of our business. And the activity is still going quite well. I have to say that, but it's probably the same thing that a lot of retailers have seen, is that there's been a slight drop in April, but since March, the activity online has been quite good, especially the sales that we make in Asia. It seems that the market is sort of like back on track. Now looking at the integration of our service with certain brands in Europe specifically, we definitely have headwind because, you know, the news cycle sort of prevents anyone to sort of move forward with any new initiative, which is totally understandable. And part of our service also makes sense to be presented in stores. And so, you know, when brands can't completely leverage all the marketing opportunity around this new initiative, it's completely understandable that they want to slow down on the launch of the service.
Yeah, it's pretty much uncertain situation for many brands that I also am in touch with, especially in Europe. Could you tell us a little bit more? So you mentioned that there is a way to integrate it in the points of sale with the brands and so on. So could you a little bit go deeper into what you do? Because what I find quite intriguing about your company, because you are, let's say, riding the wave of changing the luxury consumer mindset and entering into the second-hand luxury. But on the other hand, there is a lot about changing the brand mindset as well. So the fact that 50% of millennials are already buying luxury secondhand is one important trend, but still there is a lot that about the brand culture that needs to be digested and open up to those opportunities. So could you put in perspective the role that a platform like yours can play for big brands in their engagement, especially in the part of the product life that used to be invisible for them previously?
Yeah, it's important to start from from what led us to building this product. The starting point on our end has been, first of all, considering that a lot of brands stop being involved with their products after the point of sale. And there is some sort of a duty for brands to take ownership of the afterlife of their product, or what happened outside of their stores. The other element that we considered was that brands were, if not disconnected, they were also in some sense excluded from the secondhand market. And that's also sort of distinction, a break where brands, in our perspective, were missing out on an opportunity. And so, you know, to give you a broad perspective on our rationale and how we present the service to clients, there is this sense of being involved in the secondhand business might be, you know, an existential question for a lot of luxury brands. There might be a lot of questions about how it can affect their brand equity or their market themselves. But our perspective is to say that, as you mentioned, there is a consumer behavioral change that already happened. There's a vast majority of the new generation that perceive vintage as what's cool today. The type of clients that buy or sell in the secondhand are also not necessarily people who are trying to make a penny on you know, a sidekick. It's often people with a lot of money who have too much stuff in their wardrobe who just wants to clear out their wardrobe. And so, because there's already a consumer behavioral change, that the market, the secondhand market, has a model that has been confirmed by big market players, my perspective is that brands should consider secondhand in a different light. There is the question of taking on the responsibility of their products after the sale, which I mentioned, but which is also something that they could consider in a sense that it is an opportunity to align the customer experience, or to have some sort of extension of their brand standards beyond the point of sale. The other thing for brand to consider is the financial opportunity. And so, you know, today we talk about sustainability, but the reality is that the secondhand market is growing 20 times faster than traditional retail. In a few years, it will reach 50 billion. Some studies suggest that it's going to become bigger than fast fashion in the next 10 years. There's a real sensible financial opportunity behind this. And so it's not only about creating an extension of your service, something that you can bring into your customer experience in line with repairs, for example. There's also a real financial marketing opportunity to leverage a fantastic storytelling around sustainability, rewarding customers for extending their product life cycle. And so, you know, the argument that I have often with brands, and the discussion completely vary according to where the brand is in situ in the sort of like the pyramid, the hierarchy of where they are in the luxury sector. But my argument is to say there is a financial opportunity. The second is, and that I think is something to raise, is that this trend is not here to stop, and whether brands get involved in this market or not, this will continue to be predominant in consumer behavior. And so I use the analogy of online, where a lot of brands have missed out on an opportunity about 10 years ago, where a lot of luxury brands looked at digital as something that was sort of not elegant enough or not in line with their brand equity. And literally left the online market to third-party players like Farfetch or Net-a-Porter. And my take is that brands have many reasons to get involved in the second-hand market, including not letting this opportunity to third-party players. I can go on for quite a while, but these are sort of like the main ideas behind the opportunity.
It's a very good point. I myself used to work for Net-a-Porter for quite a few years, and I really saw this migration of the mindset of brands that maybe 10 years ago they were saying that going online would destroy the customer experience and the sales ritual and the physicality and exclusivity of it. And then a few years down the line, we were selling IWC watches for tens of thousands of euros online. So,
and now you see a lot of brands who are migrating all their technology from Yoox to their own system.
Sure.
So
yeah, it's a natural cycle, I would say.
The question and the opportunity is, do you want to maintain the customer experience within your brand ecosystem, or do you want to leave it to third party?
Absolutely. Marta, maybe what you do and what you're observing could really plug in nicely into this conversation. So from what I understand, you follow very closely the developments in the fashion industry, especially when it comes to the mix of innovation and sustainability. So while we are all now trying to understand the new normal, what the next thing, what the immediate next thing is going to be for the industry, could you share your perspective on the role that innovation is going to play in advancing the fashion sustainability agenda? So which technologies do you see gaining importance, and which do you perceive as a fad?
Mm-hmm. Well, first of all, I just wanted to connect to those. I wanted to echo, Michaela, that I do worry as well now about garment workers. I think, it's really important to have transparent supply chains. And also, the current situation shows how fractured the industry is, how many gaps we have in the industry. And I really believe that leaders should focus, on creating more transparent supply chains, to be more flexible, to be maybe, to be able to react much easier. Maybe they're going to put it local. So that's my biggest worry at the moment. And also, yes, that's true what Felix said. Everything, the second-hand market and rental market is growing really fast. Vestile Collective secured a lot of financial money before the pandemic, so we definitely see growth here. Still, to connect those two, to supply chain and second-hand market, I'm still worried about those people in Bangladesh in factories. It's like, that's my biggest worry at the moment. I think, yes, so first of all, what's at the current moment, as we talked before, it's like everyone is just worried about the cash flow. Just everything else went to the backtrack for the moment. So there is also a worry how sustainable plans will follow. I think it really depends how deep in the companies they are based. It's closer to the core, they will stand and they will go forward. Like, I can't imagine Stella McCartney changing her plans, not being sustainable anymore. But people being layoffs and also sustainable teams. So we really see also, looking at startups and technologies, investments are unfortunately dropping. First 3 months of this year, I think it dropped about 20% already. So that's quite worrying. But this is also the best time to reinvent, reimagine all the business models and the companies, for those companies who will be able to, who won't get closed and bankrupt, that's probably one of the best time. It's just, we're going to be probably talking about pre-pandemic and after, after the situation. It's like, I think all the huge event like works and situation like now, there, that's the necessity is the mother of creation. So we will definitely see a lot of interesting technologies really rising very fast. It's like what we can see with going to digital, virtual, you know, worlds, 3D printings and 3D body scannings, you know, trying to have the virtual shops online. That's really interesting, and it's really booming. So I really believe that's quite important. I don't think it's for everyone though. I think, you know, some companies really need to think about their own core mission. You know, they don't necessarily need to be so innovative. They need to look at the customer base and try to get better connection with their consumers. Not everyone needs to have virtual experience. I think very important for brands will be, you know, to go into having better management of the staff. They don't want to have too much. That's another issue that I'm worried about regarding sustainability, that, you know, there's so many garments in stores unsold. So I'm not sure what will happen with them. If they're gonna go on sale, if they're gonna go straight to the landfills, maybe burn. So that would be nice to have some legislation here. But, you know, to better manage, you know, what is necessary, you know, what we should buy for this season. They're just using artificial intelligence. So business to business investor probably will start looking for this, you know. The other thing, you know, everything's like for what was already on the rise will continue. It's like blockchains and Internet of Things, you know, creating transparent supply chains, and I said, and I think avatars, 3D body scannings is on the rise as well. I mentioned that. And actually, I was thinking about it, what won't go so much forward. It's like, I think, you know, it really depends what's your profile to decide which technologies won't go forward. And I wanted to ask you guys, which technologies do you think they won't be worth to go forward? I think it really depends where you stand. So
yeah, it is a complex issue, but as you were saying, there is a lot of worry about what is going to happen with the garments that are in stock at the moment. And I think it connects very nicely to the point that Michela mentioned earlier on. And there is a lot about regulation that so far is not happening simply. So in one of my previous conversations, one of the speakers mentioned the absolute need of the governments to regulate the sales season this year, because as the shops are reopening and as the people are willing to enter into the stores, there is a risk that everything will be heavily discounted. And if everything gets heavily discounted and we start all competing on price, then there would be less margin and consequently less money for the supply chain, because those are the people that get paid at the very end. So there is a lot about regulation in this industry that hasn't happened yet. Michaela, I wanted to ask you for your comment about that, but also if you could help us when it comes to the traceability solution, because I get to see a lot of innovation. I get to see a lot of startups that are doing something similar to what you guys are doing. But for a person coming from the outside of that business, it is quite hard to distinguish what solutions are the best ones, and there is no regulation around it. So how difficult is it to make a solution that truly tracks textile in retail, and what should brands pay attention to when choosing a traceability solution for their supply chain? So what are the things that matter?
Sure. So to answer your first question, so my comment would be that perhaps 10 years ago, we would have placed the responsibility for action only on governments, and this is, I mean, it's still true. There is the need for regulation and guidelines which are for everyone and must be followed. But on the other hand, I think in today fast-moving fashion era, which is even more now dynamic and need to adapt quickly because of the current situation. I think that pioneering brands, movements have the power of actually driving a more efficient and quicker way. And there, I guess, I believe it's where also we can contribute as innovators. And then when it comes to traceability solutions, as for all other, also in traceability, there is no one guideline now, so it's a bit up to brands, up to manufacturers to decide which solution to apply. And it is indeed at times chaotic, at times there are solutions that are overlapping, which ultimately bring costs up. So I think the way of doing it in the most cost-efficient but also reliable way is to find a technology that is kind of universal, so that can be applied to pretty much all the kind of different fine material products, and also a solution that is reliable, clearly. And in this sense, there are now many solutions on the market. The most common one are like labels or paper-based chain of custody system. And what we see there is that this system neglect the need to trace the product from the raw material until the finished stage, and also to link the product information to the product itself. And so, I mean, a label, a certificate, a barcode can be faked, can be replaced, and in this sense is not always a true representation of the product itself. And then more recently we have seen blockchain, as has been just mentioned, as one of the big hypes, right? As a solution that can increase transparency by making ultimately the transaction secure and visible. And in this sense, I mean, I believe that supply chain have for sure enhanced transparency, but where blockchain hasn't been capable of ensuring true transparency and product traceability between those transactions, right? So it can happen that product get mixed, that can be replaced, and in the end, all the data that is recorded into the blockchain might be not anymore representing the reality of the product. And so there is no guarantee that the data that is recorded into a blockchain is authentic, and ultimately that the product we purchase really are what they are claimed to be. And the main issue is that you have, in a blockchain as well as in other digital traceability system, you have a flow of products information that travels physically detached from the real life product. And this makes a system vulnerable to fraud. And so where we can fill this gap is by recoupling the product information with the product itself. And that's what we do by turning the product into carrier of the information about their origin and journey. So just to clarify, we are not against blockchain, but we actually recognize the power of blockchain solutions. We just argue that this system must be enhanced with method to anchor the product information to the material.
Michela, could you briefly explain to us how your solution works actually? So like from the beginning to the end.
Sure. So, yes, so we make textile materials traceable by introducing into them some markers that contain product information. And these markers are based on DNA, which is nature's information storage system. So essentially what we do is provide every product with a unique DNA identity, just like humans, right? And so these markers are provided as a liquid formulation that is sprayed on the raw material, so early on in the supply chain, so on cotton, cashmere, or any other textile raw material, raw fiber. and once applied to the fiber, it stick to it and still link to the product throughout the whole supply chain. So it survive all the processing steps, distribution, storage, until the retail level. So we can, at any point during production, manufacturer and brands can submit the product to a test that allows to identify the product and verify its origin. So each marker is unique and is associated with a specific producer, specific farm, even a lot number. So in this way, we can really identify the product at granular level and determine its origin, and differentiate, for instance, a class of materials like, I don't know, organic cotton or BCI cotton from conventional cotton. So ultimately verify and prove physically product claims.
Continuing on that same line of argument, Felix, could you tell us a little bit more what role traceability plays in your business model? Because a few years ago, it seemed that counterfeit was the only problem of the luxury industry. So I believe that moving it secondhand, it is even more so. So could you tell us how you go about it in your business?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, counterfeiting is still a big issue. To put things in perspective, the size of counterfeited products that end up in most sort of like recognized professionals reseller marketplaces is fairly minimal. The contests exist, but it's not a major issue on big player platform like the Real Traceability. Now, having said that, it's still an issue, and it's still a gray market for brands. And I think the main issues on the brand side is considering the secondhand market as a gray market, as an environment on which they have no visibility. And so I think this is another reason why brands should get involved in the secondhand business. If they get involved, this is how they can potentially trace products and get more understanding of the secondhand market. The way we consider traceability is through the perspective that we're collecting information from the source. So in order to resell a product, you need to have that past purchases registered into the brand's database. So it's only because you've bought the original product that you can resell that item. Also, we collect the relevant information from the source. So that's also an important element, because most of the time when you resell, you tend to forget the name of that product, the materials that are used, etc. The information that we can collect really depends on the state of the database of the brand or the retailer we work with. But what's important to note is that we're capable through our system to create a link in between the product that has been selected to be resold and the listing that's end up on all the different marketplaces on which the product have been pushed. And so with that, you create a form of a stamp of traceability. Now, to get back to Michela's comments, there's still a risk to for the reseller to change the item, and there's always a risk to decorrelate the physical element with a digital sort of product listing or digital certificate linked to that product. But the fact that you need to have purchased the original product in the first place make it quite difficult to scan the system. First, because you can much more easily be traced back as the scammer, and you would be better off using fake names and doing the scam on your own through eBay directly. But also because financially it's not really clever to, or scalable to buy really expensive products and then, trying to shift fake one through this method. There's much more efficient ways to do it. That's what I'm trying to say. And in this perspective, we believe there's a great opportunity for brands to do two things. One is creating this stamp of traceability with items that are pushed from their environment and making them more desirable on the secondhand market. The other interesting element with these stamp of traceability is the possibility of collecting a number of data sets around the resale process and allowing the brands to be able to get a better understanding of the secondhand market. And the last element is connecting with the secondhand buyer. And this is where there's another fantastic commercial opportunity here. There's a possibility to send a message to through our system, to send a message to the secondhand buyer to tell them, do you want to be registered as the rightful owner of that product? And so this is a way to get a direct way of interacting with a secondhand buyer, but also to create a legitimate chain of ownership of a given item. And this is the one interesting part of our value proposition, I think, for brands and retailers.
Very interesting, Felix. I believe that also from how you explained it, that also the big marketplaces like the Real and so on, did they find it working with you as an additional guarantee of the product authenticity, being that you work directly with brands?
Absolutely, absolutely. So, you know, part of the challenges of these marketplaces is sourcing inventory and authenticating these products. And so this is why a lot of the marketplaces that we work with are very happy to connect with us, because this is where 2 points are where you bring value to them.
That's really good. So I'm just being aware of time, and I'm trying to bring our discussion to a closure and returning to the main topic. So Marta, you, for example, you've been in Davos this winter during the World Economic Forum at an event dedicated to fashion sustainability. So going back to the messages that you heard in that meeting, what do you see as the main new hurdles in the sustainability effort for fashion in the light of the COVID crisis, and how could we perhaps address them and ensure that that this crisis doesn't present a setback to the efforts that have been made in the past?
Well, first of all, the fashion and luxury was one of the hit the most, probably, with all the store closures, and so that's the biggest, you know, go back that you know, everyone, as I mentioned before, are concentrating only on very important issue now, which is cash and money, you know, cash flow. So all the non-essential spending was frozen. We don't know for how long. It's not only for brands, but also for consumers, because so many people lost their jobs, lost their earnings. So they just, you know, it's probably from one hand, it's like almost the end of the pandemic, but the other recession, huge economic recession, is just starting. So we are not sure how it will look in the near future and how many years it will take to go back to be able to finance those innovations. You know, so that's the biggest concern. It's like, as I said, you know, if someone had sustainably in core, then it's good. But it's really scary time. You know, it's just so. So I think, you know, just. I think, you know, all the legislation needs to be put in place, and we can't work alone. You know, there is so many great ideas around, like you two guys, and I also so many startups. But without help, without collaboration, and really trying to change the business in a bigger space, I'm not sure how successful it will be. And we really need to realize that if we will go to business as pre-pandemic, there will be probably much more and much worse catastrophes, because we just can't consume like this. We're just gonna kill our planet, and that's really scary. So we have to use all the efforts, even with, you know, little money, to create a better industry. And I remember, you know, when I was talking with my friends from design courses, they had no money to design, and the only thing what they were using was their imagination. And the lecturer was saying that's the best way, you know, how you can really change the world without having much. And the same is with kids, you know, if they really don't have much toys, like really easy, it's like making them think and create even more. And so let's see, I think that's the big issue, and that's still a question, you know, how it will change, how quick, and how much businesses will be desperate, you know, to keep this fast fashion business models, which is just crazy. And especially that, you know, the population is growing so fast, so how it can look in 10 years, you know, if we're gonna just do the same crazy stuff. And it's like, especially that, you know, most of us do not need clothes at all, you know, we have enough. It's just this whole industry is based on dreams, aspirations. So I think, you know, what brands need to concentrate at the moment, it's not just trying to sell stuff, it's maybe to understand the consumer more, to get closer to them, to understand, to do more person to person, and then, you know, maybe try to offer some services instead, you know, just connect in slightly different way. It's just like resell, you know, rent what they have already. But then again, coming back to people within the supply chain to find a new work for them, that they have some, you know, money for food, for everyday living. You know, that was, for the moment, the industry was so broken, that was, you know, that was modern slavery. So that's just can't be like this. So even if that time is so difficult, I think that it's amazing, you know, the best reset point in our history, probably in our lives. So we really need to put all the efforts to bring the changes.
Thank you very much, Marta.
It's quite emotional for me.
Yeah. Michela, so closing points from your side. One of the journalists I spoke with last week said that, I mean, it's not enough in the fashion world to be a designer, because it's going to be the engineers and the innovators that are going to change the industry for real, with innovations and so on. And I think that what you're doing is such a beautiful example of that. So how, like from where you see it and the problems you were addressing earlier about the supply chain, so how do we ensure that this crisis is not a setback, but an opportunity?
I mean, what Marta said is correct. So, I mean, in an economic crisis, or anyway, we are just coming out of it, and then still in this situation is about getting the right priority to ensure that the company gets through it without with minimal damage, and this is a fact. So for sure, in the current moment, some of the topics around sustainability are not at the top of the they're not at the top of the priority, but what I think everyone agrees on in this panel is that there is an undeniable behavioral change happening in the industry, and this is not going to be impacted by the crisis. Actually, has been reinforced by the crisis, especially from the consumer perspective. And therefore this trend is going to stay, and now it's about ensuring that that companies will make the necessary effort to pick up again these topics and make the necessary changes towards more sustainable business model. And what we can do here is again support companies in rethinking and reshaping their supply chains in a more flexible and visible way. And we have seen that many of the goods shortage and disruption in supply chains have happened also because there's no visibility currently. So many companies don't have visibility beyond their first tire, and therefore that has made it difficult during the crisis to switch to different suppliers, for instance. So this is for sure a necessary step to take. So rethink and reshape supply chain in a way that are more flexible, more transparent, and can better respond to future crises. And so we together with the movements or pioneering brands will make the necessary effort in this direction, and also try to align now the stakeholders in the industry to make this happen faster.
Thank you very much, Michela. I'm sure that your company and the company similar to yours need to be the part of this change that we are hoping to see. So Felix, the closing comments from your side, so sustainability and COVID, and how do we ensure that this is actually an opportunity for positive change?
Big question. I think that brands will have to take more risk and try and not be scared of trying things. The problem of the current state of the fashion industry, in my humble perspective, is that it's run by marketers, and it's a lot about image and aspiration, and I think a lot of brands are too scared of changing the status quo because they're worried of damaging their brand equity. And I think these times it's going to be very difficult it's a very difficult question. It's a very difficult question. But my hope is that brands will be willing to take risks. And as I said briefly, there's a real opportunity in new business models that could have a positive impact and a financial opportunity. So they should consider them and not be scared of adjusting their business model.
Thank you very much, Felix. Thank you very much, Michaela and Marta as well. I think we opened up a lot of interesting topics today. Unfortunately, we couldn't go into depth with all of them, but I think you gave a lot of food for thought to many people that would be listening to us. So I'm sure that our audience find this very stimulating, at least, especially the brands that would be watching. For all of you that are watching us, we'll be bringing these discussions weekly to the Loomish Essays LinkedIn account. So please make sure that you follow us if you want to hear more about fashion sustainability in the time of crisis. Thank you very much, everyone, and have a good day. Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks.